45 million people depend on the rainforest for food, but many are at risk of starvation due to a new kind of fuel. It is used in cars and to produce electricity. This is the story of biofuel and how global demand for it is threatening the food supplies of billions. At the beginning of the new millennium, the EU Parliament tried to usher in a new green revolution. The Green Party led the way, singing the praises of biofuels. One of the most passionate advocates was Claude Turmes, energy expert of the European Greens.
Renewable energy is the energy form of the 21st century, for our climate, for our environment, to secure our independence from oil and gas. But also in terms of development policy, there is no future for billions of people in the world without renewable energies.
The green policies prove popular. In 2003, the European Parliament decides that member countries are to blend 2% of biofuels from plant-based oils such as maize, rapeseed, soya and palm oil nuts with conventional fuel. Biofuels are seen as climate-friendly and resource-friendly because the plants grow back. The EU is funding research into biofuels and their cultivation with billions of euros. The 2% biofuel mix is mandatory. European subsidies are financing the transformation of the automobile industry. Meanwhile, almost every new car can run on a mixture of up to 30% biofuel. The German government has even introduced a new €2,500 bonus for those who scrap their old cars and buy a new one. Green fuel, straight from the farm, is seen as the answer to Europe's energy hunger. Consumers like the idea.
It helps to lower our oil consumption. Farmers make good money from it too, and it helps them secure their livelihood by moving in a new direction. It's good. It's not expensive and it's economical. I'm thinking of the future, and maybe it's a way to save oil in order to help the planet.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, in Indonesia, natural rainforests are being turned into palm oil plantations because Europe consumes far more biofuels than it can produce. The existing palm oil plantations produce oil used in food and household products. This is why new plantations are needed. These new monocultures are being set up with European taxpayers' money. EU subsidies are thereby endangering the livelihoods of some 45 million Indonesians. One of them is Din Perulak, chief of the Orang Rimba tribe.
We don't own any land. We have no fixed abode. People must understand this, and they must know that by cutting down the rainforest, they are taking away our home. It will be the end of us. Where else are we to get the food we need to survive?
Din has lived all his life from the plants and the animals in the rainforest. His natural food supply is being taken away. The clear areas are turned into plantations. The monocultures that are being set up here will take 4 years to bear the first fruit. We first met Din's clan in 2001. Back then, he still lived in the forest near a national park deep in central Sumatra. The jungle is home to tigers and a large number of rare and endangered plant and wildlife species. A few years ago, it was large enough to still feed wildlife and humans alike. The Orang Rimba tribe is self-reliant. They hunt animals, fish and collect plants. The Orang Rimba believe the rainforest has a soul. The wild is like a father and a mother to them. This is why they call themselves the children of the rainforest. They live from its plants and animals, and the large trees give them shelter from wind and rain. The Orang Rimba believe that the gods have chosen their people to live in the rainforest and enable them to survive there. Nobody knows how to survive there better than they do. They weave baskets with rattan to barter for food they can't find in the rainforest. They give the baskets to local farmers in exchange for food, such as sweet potatoes. In the past, they were entirely self-reliant and had enough to eat. Their whole life, the Orang Rimba have lived in harmony with nature. They have great respect for it, using it but not destroying it. They believe that the spirits sometimes turn evil and haunt the souls of their children. They believe the spirits kill their children or make them very sick. This is what happens when the forest is destroyed. They tell each other by the fireside. They complain about the large corporations that are responsible for cutting down the rainforest. The Indonesian paper and palm oil giant Sinar Mas poses one of the biggest threats to them. The chief has seen with his own eyes how Sinar Mas operates. First they cut down the trees, then they sell the wood, and then they let the soil dry out and plant their oil palm plantations everywhere. While Dean tells us about the problem, we hear chainsaws at work. It's the first time that the loggers have moved in this close to the forest of the Orang Rimba. It makes them very scared. But still, a small group of them get together to go and see what's happening. The tribe's people are powerless. They can only stand by and watch their living space being destroyed. Since the early 80s, some 60 million hectares have fallen victim to the chainsaws, an area the size of France. At first, the wood was used to make furniture and paper. Then palm oil plantations were started for food oils and soaps. But since the palm oil is being used in Europe as a biofuel for cars and electricity production, the natural rainforest has been shrinking even faster. Burning down the forest is still the cheapest and fastest way to make way for palm oil plantations. Due to this process, Indonesia has become the third biggest greenhouse gas emitter in the world. By clearing the forest, the ground emits even more captured CO2. But despite this, in 2006 the Indonesian government decided on a new master plan. 26 million hectares of forest, an area the size of Great Britain, has been earmarked for palm oil plantations. After all, the government earns a lot of money from palm oil exports. Palm oil plantations as far as the eye can see. Bad times for small farmers in Indonesia, who grow their own produce in the rainforest. This is where a forest once stood that supported an entire village. Somat is a farmer who made his living with rubber trees and by growing vegetables. In 2003, Sinar Mas stole his land.
I'm furious. This is my land, but I simply don't get any of the proceeds from the palm oil. Since they stole our forest, we've seen nothing from them.
The farmland is becoming smaller and smaller. The farmers are unable to even grow enough produce to feed the Indonesian people. Since 2006, Indonesia has been dependent on rice imports. Food prices have risen sharply. There has been no compensation for farmers since the village forest has disappeared. But some farmers from Saralonggun have come together to try and fight back. In the spring of 2007, they travelled to the provincial capital to demonstrate against their mistreatment by the plantation owner, Sinar Mas. The farmers chant, "Stop the theft, give us back our land." Ferry Irawan is a well-known environmental activist in Indonesia. He advises the farmers and supports them in their dealings with the authorities and industry. He demands that the police let the demonstrators into the town hall for them to be able to tell the council how they have been treated. The police officer is friendly and promises to check if the council is there. He asks the demonstrators to be patient.
Kami datang sini Bapak Polisi untuk menuntut hak kami yang dikelola PT KDA dengan korporasi tiga serubun.
But the protests only get louder. Their anger has been building up for several years now. Somat says they have come to tell the authorities about their plight and how the large corporations stole their land. The logging began 4 years ago already. The farmers have no income, he says, and that Sinar Mas owes them compensation. After difficult negotiations, 5 representatives of the farmers are allowed to enter the town hall. It's the first time they've been granted the opportunity to tell their story. The farmers have documents to prove they own the land, but the company just ignored them, and the government has so far not done anything about the matter. The army is protecting the interests of Sinar Mas. Its officers protect the companies and even influence the decisions of politicians. Corruption is one of the biggest problems. The council tries to mediate.
We have contacted Sinar Mas several times. They said they have no problem with the farmers. And we, as the government, want them to finally clear up the question as to who owns the land. And if Sinar Mas doesn't own the land, they should compensate the farmers.
The council is under pressure to serve the government's interests.
The government supports the worldwide biofuel program. That's why they need companies like Sinar Mas to turn more land into palm oil plantations. But there are limits too. We have no more land here. But still, we will make sure more palm oil plantations are set up elsewhere.
The talks end with an absurd suggestion. The farmers are to be given back their land if they take on the €3 million loan which Sinar Mas took out in order to pay for the palm oil plantation. The company knows full well that this will never happen. The government too can say it tried to mediate, while it continues to cooperate with the most important exporter of palm oil. Where does the company see its responsibilities towards the farmers, given the domestic food shortages in Indonesia?
You like it or not, the people need food. Fry, goreng, mentega.
If they like it or not, everyone needs food. They use palm oil to fry food and cook with margarine made from palm oil. And that palm oil is now also the biofuel of the future is a great thing. It's incredibly cheap. We have to turn more land into palm oil plantations to meet the demand in future.
Abandoned land harus di-reforestry, harus ditanami.
The farmers have no chance against Sinar Mas. They don't even get compensation for the land they have lost. And the company can continue to log forests to make way for palm oil plantations. Back in Europe at the Paris Motor Show, The food crisis and the plight of Indonesian farmers are on nobody's mind here. Biofuels are still being hailed a green alternative. The EU is still holding on to its 10% quota.
If we assume that all new engines will be able to run on a 10% biofuel mixture, then the immediate effect on the environment will be huge. In the long run, we want to see as many cars as possible run on biofuels. Then the cumulative effect on the climate would be even bigger.
The EU guideline has encouraged car makers to develop cars that can handle high concentrations of biofuel. Instead, Brussels could have given car makers the incentive to research and develop eco-friendly alternatives to the old combustion engine. The French oil giant Total also simply did what the EU dictated. The company therefore doesn't feel responsible for the consequences on the other side of the world.
Until 2005-2006, Total voluntarily blended biofuels into conventional fuel. Then we were ordered to do so by law, and this legislation still affects our actions at Total till today. We at Total always used to buy biofuel from local companies, from German and French biofuel companies. I don't know, however, whether these companies import the plant fuel or produce it themselves.
Par conséquent, je ne sais pas si eux-mêmes l'importent ou s'ils le fabriquent sur place.
Nobody bothers to question where the biofuel they buy comes from. In every litre of diesel sold in Europe, there is always a percentage of biofuel. The lower the world market price for biofuel is, the higher the dose. At times, it's up to a quarter. The cheapest biofuel, palm oil, is in particularly high demand. The EU imports more than 3 million tons of palm oil each year. Whether it's rapeseed, maize or palm oil, Europe is promoting the use of energy plants and creating financial incentives. Every country has launched its own programs. With tax benefits on top of already high prices, oil and electricity companies are guaranteed huge profits. 6 billion euros in subsidies have been allocated to convert public transport vehicles to biofuel. Electricity produced with biofuel has been subsidized since 2003. Energy companies like MyCity, a northern German supplier, are in the market for cheap plant oil, but they advertise their electricity as a green and sustainable alternative.
Doch, finde ich gut.
I think it's good. I've switched over to green energy. Yes, at least it's better for the environment. But I wouldn't mind it being a bit cheaper.
Yes, we live in nature and we come from nature, so I'd say it makes me feel good to support this.
But part of the green energy made in Germany comes from power plants that run on palm oil. There are more than 2,000 such power plants throughout the country already. It's a lucrative business. A special law in Germany, the Renewable Energies Law, guarantees a minimum price for electricity from renewable sources. But with biofuel, the problem is that the source isn't questioned. This has led to a situation whereby some green energy suppliers in Germany are contributing to food shortages in countries on the other side of the world. Unknowingly, their customers are supporting these short-sighted policies. Every year, biofuel power plant owners earn more than 100 million euros extra due to Germany's renewable energy law. Nobody controls how much palm oil is burnt in the process. At the World Climate Summit in 2007 on the Indonesian island of Bali, governments and NGOs from around the world struggled to try to agree on a binding commitment to green energy. The chance to change the tide on this looming humanitarian and environmental disaster was missed completely. Instead, European politicians continue to propagate biofuels as the savior of our climate. They are holding on to the myth that plant-based fuels, regardless where they're from, can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. The competition between food and fuel is left out of the equation. Outside the conference, Indonesian critics of the biofuel program have gathered, but they're not allowed to demonstrate here.
Excuse me, sir, why do you have to check it? Why do you have to check it? Why can't they demonstrate here, sir?
Because it's not an authorised demonstration.
Somat has travelled from Sumatra to Bali to demonstrate against the international palm oil companies and their insatiable hunger for biofuels.
Nobody in Indonesia agrees with your biofuel policy. We just don't have the space here anymore. We need the space to grow food. These biofuels are killing us. They are taking away our food and our drinking water. This is what makes me so angry.
The protests begin to show results. A delegation of German politicians travels to Borneo to see for themselves the effects of palm oil monocultures. Among them are some of the pioneers of the European biofuels movement. Upon her arrival, Bärbel Höhn, the architect of the German biofuel policy, is still convinced that they are part of the solution for climate change. We were meant to accompany the group on a visit to a palm oil plantation, but at the last moment the owners tell us we're not welcome. We ask the politicians to film their visit for us. The parliamentarians want to find out if it makes sense to introduce a so-called eco-label for palm oil production. The Western politicians are wooed and mollycoddled every step of the way. The plantation owners know full well that these are the people who decide whether Europe will introduce an eco-certificate for sustainable palm oil production. It could bring an end to the logging of the rainforest and an end to the use of toxic pesticides and fertilizers. But even such a label would not ensure that Indonesians have enough to eat in future.
Like I say, the demand right now for biofuels is increasing.
The problems cannot be overlooked, but some politicians are trying to minimize the damage.
We have to make sure that we keep these risks as small as possible. We just have to find the right ways. For example, we need a proper form of certification, one that really deserves the name.
Back to Din Perilak. All his knowledge about nature has become obsolete. The forest where he lived has been destroyed. Indonesia's indigenous people have lost their traditional homes due to the oil palm plantations, and they are going hungry. The Orang Rimba live along the Sumatra highway now. It is embarrassing for them, but they are forced to beg for food from the few remaining farmers who still own land. We are hungry, Din says, and asks the farmer to dig out a few roots for them. Today his clan is lucky. The women are given a whole cassava. The roots are now their main food. They are high in starch but contain too little fat, protein and vitamins. They have nothing left to trade. The massive logging has also destroyed the rattan bushes, which they used to use to weave baskets. Europe's biofuel program, subsidized with taxpayers' money, has caused hunger in Indonesia. Even the planned eco-certificate will do nothing to change that. It takes 4 years until the palm oil nuts are ripe. That's why more and more land is being turned into plantations. It's the only way to ensure an uninterrupted and constant supply. Only few farmers still own their own land. In order to survive, they help out on the plantations at harvest time. The palm oil nuts have to be harvested and pressed within 24 hours, otherwise they begin to rot. The transportation business is entirely in the hands of the large companies. They determine the price. When the price of oil is high, demand for palm oil is high, and so are the prices. But when the oil price drops, like during the worldwide financial crisis, there is no work and no pay. The entire region has become dependent on the world market. The palm oil presses at the edge of the fields run all day long. Every day, tons of CO2 are emitted here in order to produce a product that is meant to help improve our climate. It's a calculation that just doesn't add up. Indonesia alone produced 14 million tons of palm oil last year. 90% of it was made for export. Ordinary Indonesians do not reap any of the benefits from this boom. On the contrary, palm oil has become scarce and expensive for them. Outside the palm oil press of a large corporation, which markets its oil as sustainable in Europe, Indonesian children fight to get hold of the few remaining palm oil nuts and the waste that falls by the wayside. They are forced to collect only the waste that is left over from the lucrative palm oil business, in order to earn just a few cents to buy themselves something to eat. An advertising sign sums up the misleading message the government and industry would like the Indonesian people to believe. It reads, "Palm oil, a safe income for our farmers and the biotrend of the future." Day and night, palm oil trucks carry their loads along Sumatra's dirt roads. All roads lead to Dumai, Indonesia's main palm oil exporting port. Only a few sea miles from the Malaysian coast, this is where the world's largest palm oil company, Wilmar, has its refineries. It is the main supplier of palm oil for Europe. We would like to have asked how much palm oil is exported from here and how many liters of biofuel are shipped to Europe from here. But we are not allowed to film. The company is secretive. We are told because of all the smuggling that goes on here. Since the Indonesian government introduced high export duties in order to control the export of palm oil and ensure its domestic supply, smuggling is rife. To find out how much is really exported, we go out to sea. The Wilmar Corporation is just loading the Stolt Confidence, a large tanker from neighbouring Malaysia. We receive confirmation that the shipment is destined for Germany and Denmark. We also find out that there is no official record of this ship having been in Indonesia. The people of the palm oil port of Dumai are desperately poor. Since the EU has decided to import palm oil for fuel and energy purposes, the price of palm oil has more than doubled and the supply has dropped. Palm oil is the only fat that these people have to fry and cook their food.
It isn't fair. It is all being exported and we don't have enough cooking oil even. You first have to make sure that people have enough to eat. Stop these exports, we don't have enough left here. Really, we are rich. We are rich in palm oil, but also the palm oil is made in our country. It has become very expensive here. The way I see it, there are so many palm oil plantations here, but we hardly see any of the oil. It is scarce and expensive.
Only in 2008 do Europe's Green Party politicians realize that biofuels are causing food shortages in developing countries. They change their policies and start to call biofuels agrofuels.
We have tabled a vote against the EU's current agrofuel quota. We Greens were in favor of 0%, but we were only able to move the others from 10 to 4%. Still, it was a big success for us.
But lowering the quota to 4% doesn't solve the hunger problem. Even to fulfill this new quota, an area the size of Belgium has to be transformed into palm oil monocultures each year. Françoise Grostet represents President Nicolas Sarkozy's party. She is concerned about the problem, but like many politicians, she sees the responsibility elsewhere.
I think our automobile industry has to do a lot more, both in terms of research and new developments, in order to produce cleaner cars as fast as possible. There's already a mandatory quota for biofuels and conventional fuel, and we will continue to have such a quota in future.
Madame Grostet sees no need to change existing policies or the cars we drive. She likes to drive fast, but that's caused her to have to take taxis for a while. And what do the car makers say? We asked Germany's largest luxury car maker, Daimler. The company has continued to focus on large engine limousines and trucks. Biofuels and the European guidelines suit the company's future plans well. Daimler is hedging its bets on the second generation of biofuels, which according to the company no longer compete with food production. Professor Herbert Kohler is an expert for the new generation biofuels at Daimler.
We mustn't forget that we have 800 million cars worldwide, and they all need fuel. So we have always welcomed the biofuel quota as a measure for here and now.
Daimler is looking ahead to try and find viable alternatives to oil. The company has been experimenting with new plant-based fuels. One of these is made from the Jatropha nut. Jatropha is viewed as unproblematic, as the plant that is supposed to grow on fallow land and does not compete with food farming. Daimler got involved in publicly financed Jatropha projects in 2004 already.
Our involvement with Jatropha was aimed at being part of this new development from the beginning, that we support the initial stages also financially. But given the huge distance, we can't accompany such projects over a longer term.
Biofuel traders get together for a Jatropha conference. The new fuel is viewed as a good business opportunity. Participants have to pay €1,700 entrance fee. African countries are especially keen to see Jatropha become the next big biofuel. This man represents the Congolese government's interests in biofuel. Everybody wants to profit from the boom. Many countries are keen to get their hands into the EU's huge pot of subsidies. Piero Venturi reveals just how much Europe has earmarked for biofuel research.
53 billion euro.
The EU has high hopes in biofuel.
Jatropha is a non-food crop. Jatropha is a toxic crop, so cannot be used for food production. And so we would not have the case, for example, that we could find with corn that has a double use, so this can determine a sort of competition. For Jatropha, I mean, we don't have this situation, and anyway, Jatropha will not go to be cultivated in areas where food crops are cultivated.
We go to India to find out if the EU's biofuel expert is right. This is where the first international Jatropha oil project was started in 2003. The land must be well irrigated. But even on fertile ground, the plants need at least 3 years to bear the first fruit. The Indian government has allocated 110 million hectares for Jatropha cultivation. 50 million of them alone are in the state of Rajasthan. These milk cows need plenty of water. The people here live from milk production. But 3 years ago in Rajasthan, Jatropha plantations started to take over more and more of the fertile pasture land. Jatropha is meant to grow on fallow land. But the plants grow slowly, and now already the poisonous bushes are taking away valuable pasture land from India's sacred cows. More than a third of India's milk products come from Rajasthan. Millions of Indians rely on milk as their main source of protein. The majority of the population do not eat meat either for religious reasons or because they can't afford it. Cows are sacred in India, not at least because they have such an important role in feeding the nation. First, the public village pastures were converted into jatropha plantations. Day labourers were hired for a few cents to plant the bushes. Nobody told them who will harvest the jatropha nuts and whom they belong to. The dairy farmers see the plant as competition because it infringes on their pasture land and takes too much water out of the ground.
When the plants grow bigger, it will just get worse. I only own one cow, and I can only let it graze on the village pasture. But at some point, there will be nothing but jatropha left here and no more grass. The cows will go hungry, and poor farmers like myself won't have anything left.
ICRISAT is India's leading biotechnology institute. It has received European development money, among others from the German Society for Technical Cooperation, the GTZ, to research the jatropha plant. There have been no concrete results so far, but the aim is to cultivate the plant in a way that it can grow in arid regions like the desert and produce the highest possible oil content. Since the EU has legislated the use of biofuels, the Institute has been trying to cultivate various types of jatropha, most suited for biofuel production. The head of this pioneer jatropha project is Dr. Sushana Wani.
Jatropha has the ability to survive well under low moisture condition, or it can tolerate moisture stress, but definitely it needs water. And that is what there are certain myths which are spread about jatropha, that it does not need any nutrients, it doesn't need much water, it does not have insects and pests. All these issues really need to be researched and validated, and then right answers can be found out.
At last, after 5 years, ICRISAT has had its first harvest. Their plants have grown on well-irrigated and well-fertilized soil. So far, the tests show that the plants need enough water to produce any significant amount of oil. Also, only the center of the nuts can be used. All other parts of the plant cannot be used for biofuel production. It seems that the plant needs a lot of space for comparatively little biofuel. This is what makes jatropha problematic, as it competes with farming land. In the laboratory, scientists are researching the plant's genes. It could take years of research without any guarantee of success before a type of jatropha is developed which fulfills all the criteria of being a sustainable source of biofuel.
In case of jatropha, the development has preceded the research, and generally development comes after the research. Once the products are available, then only the development activities start. But in case of jatropha, it is the other way around, and that's where the need is. If we really need to harness the potential of jatropha or any biofuel for that matter, which does not compete with the food chain, in that case you need to undertake the research.
India's largest biofuel factory near Hyderabad. It has been in operation since 2007. Dr. Wani's initial research findings have simply been ignored. Tons and tons of oil-containing nuts are pressed here. As there are still too few jatropha nuts, maize kernels and pongamia nuts are pressed here. But palm oil too is used. With the demand for biofuels on the rise, the machines here are busy day and night. The technology is from Germany. That's where the world's leading manufacturers of biofuel presses are situated. The factory, which was meant to supply biofuel only for the Indian market, was financed largely with European tax money. Now it's in joint German and Indian private ownership.
it gives EN grade quality biodiesel, the best quality biodiesel in the world. So here in this actually we are using sodium methoxide as a catalyst, and which gives a good conversion level, and which meets the international standard level biodiesel, because it gives the best quality biodiesel which can sell anywhere in the world, not only in India. Even we can export to other countries.
Another much larger factory is already under construction. It will produce entirely for export. On the streets of Udaipur in the state of Rajasthan, these people are demonstrating for better pay and the right to afford at least 2 meals a day. The situation is tense because prices for basic foods are rising. Especially grain and veg prices have doubled in recent months. %60% of India's population still live on less than €1 per day. Since food has become so expensive, they have just enough money for 1 meal per day. We drive alongside the land earmarked for Jatropha plantations. We meet Kunilal Gameti, an organic farmer. His vegetable field is also destined to be turned into a Jatropha plantation, according to the plans of the Indian government.
I don't want to grow Jatropha here. My livelihood depends on this land and the vegetables I grow on it. It is a safe income, because people always need food. I am proud to be able to produce food for people. That is my duty as a farmer. I would only grow Jatropha on land where nothing else can grow.
There is plenty of publicly owned fallow land in India, but it makes no sense to grow Jatropha here. The farmer's experience is that the dream of producing biofuels without taking away valuable farming land is a green fairy tale. These Jatropha bushes were planted 3 years ago, and they still don't bear a single fruit. But the Indian government is pressing the rural population into giving up their land for Jatropha. Hundreds of thousands of Indian farmers face the same plight as Gameti. Billions of euros from European taxpayers are being poured into short-sighted biofuel policies which in future are set to become the biggest single cause of hunger in the world.